Good afternoon, class. This is John checking in. I wanted to go a little further than I was able to go in class today. And as you can see here, our objectives we spent much of our time today discussing specifically Buddhism, which is one of the universalizing religions that's discussed in Chapter 8. And specifically today, I'm hoping to talk to you a little bit about the changes that Buddhism undergoes and how those essentially equip Buddhism, which is now turning into something more resembling a religion, equip Buddhism to essentially be exported and expanded to match those 6 key traits that go along with universalizing religions, according to the introduction of Chapter 8. So here's our objective. We talked today about the primary and the central teachings of Buddhism, including the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. We sort of left off there talking, I was trying to make Buddhism feel something that you could sort of feel and understand some of these, what otherwise might just look like words, but trying to understand those words as they might be expressed in the context of a Buddhist perspective of things. So here we are. So what starts to happen in the early centuries of the Common Era is Buddhism undergoes a transformation that I would explain as it transitions from being a philosophy to being something closer to a religion. And this map is going to show you, you'll see that Buddhism begins from Siddhartha, who lives in what we would describe as modern-day northeastern India. But what's interesting about Buddhism is, even though there have been centuries of time in the past of India where Buddhism was essentially the central cultural fixture of India, it has since been displaced. Hinduism, or the Hindu tradition, which we'll start talking about later on in Chapter 8, is going to once again replace or displace Buddhism as a core religious and cultural element of India. However, Buddhism does move forcefully east, and so interestingly enough, Buddhism is far more deeply ingrained in the culture and society of places like China, Japan, and Korea than it is in its homeland of India. Now, there are plenty of Buddhists in and around India today, but in a country of well over 1 billion people, it's a minority of people who practice this once powerful and strong tradition. So Buddhism begins about 2,500 years ago or so. It's 6th century BCE, and there was a man, we have decent historical sources to support this, a young man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama. He was born into privilege, and his father had wanted that he would someday be a powerful political figure, a powerful leader. However, as a young man, Siddhartha, as the story goes, decided that his interest really lay in trying to once and for all discover what is the cause or the root of human suffering. And he lives a life as a young boy of tremendous insulation and privilege, but he discovers, much to his horror, as a young man, once he's able to escape the walls of his palace of privilege, he realizes that the real world is much less pleasant than the world he has been born into. So this begins a spiritual journey that results in the birth of the Buddhist philosophy. And what's interesting about Buddhism is, from the 6th century BCE on, Buddhism gets off to a slow start. It's not until the 300s BCE that it will actually be adopted by the Mauryan Empire, and there, from that time on, start to cover and influence and overtake the Indian subcontinent. So kind of like Confucius, it's going to be a little while before the ideas catch up with the region that first gives way to these ideas. by the early centuries of the current era, so about 2,000 years ago, Buddhism is starting to be pushed. It's being pushed out largely by the rekindled Hindu tradition, something we will discuss more later this week. And it's interesting, what seems to be happening is the philosophy of Buddhism seems to be coming up against the powerful appeal of other universalizing religions. And interestingly enough, what will happen is Buddhism, as it's being pushed out of India, is also going to take on different and new characteristics that will make it seem much more like a world religion. And so the remaining slides are an effort to help you distinguish between Theravada Buddhism, which is sort of the original form that Buddhism takes on from Siddhartha, and Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana means greater vehicle. And what's meant by this is Buddhism becomes a vehicle, a philosophy, and a religion that is available to a greater number of people. It is more accessible. And of course, that's one of the characteristics of a universalizing religion, is it's going to become accessible to more people. So these slides will be designed to try to help you understand how that works. So the Mahayana form of Buddhism is the Buddhism that is much more like a religion. So Theravada is the original pure sort of more philosophy, and the Mahayana is more the innovated, we call it syncretic, I don't know if that means anything to you, but a form that takes on new characteristics to increase its appeal to larger numbers of people. So this proves right here with Buddhism that it is adaptable, which is one of the key characteristics of universalizing religions. And also it gathers support from empire. So as we follow Mahayana Buddhism eastward into China, Japan, Korea, we're going to find that the dynasties there, the political powers, oftentimes lend support and resources and wealth and political protection to this new Buddhist religion. Okay, so here we go. We're going to try to distinguish the difference between Theravada and Mahayana. So first, regarding how they think about the Buddha. In the Theravada, they believe that Buddha was the first, he's a historical person. He's not necessarily a divine individual, but he does receive enlightenment when he sits and meditates under the Bodh Gaya tree. It is there that he receives the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. And so for the Theraveda, they are not necessarily thinking of the Buddha as some supernatural or divine person. That's different for the Mahayana. They believe that Buddha is not first and foremost a historical person, but that the Buddha represents sort of a light, if you will, that exists inside of each and every one of us. And that there's that internal Buddha that can be opened up to the eternal principles of mindfulness and not attaching to the physical world around us, a little bit like I was starting to explain in class today. Okay, so there's a distinction there. For the Theraveda, Buddha is a historical person who spawns a great philosophy. For the Mahayana, the Buddha is, I don't know, maybe in some ways sort of like Jesus. For Christians, Jesus Christ. He is Jesus, the historical person, but he is also Christ, the Messiah, a person that provides all these timeless interventions and this ability to go with people throughout time and into an afterlife. Okay? Differences between the Theraveda and the Mahayana. So you see here there's sort of a universal principle. Mahayana adds, in some ways, a universal principle, which is a key characteristic of universalizing religions. As far as essential teachings go, for the Theraveda, it's rather simple. They emphasize that the Noble Eightfold Path, which is essentially Buddha's recipe or Siddhartha's recipe for how to remove desire from one's life, those are the essential teachings, that one should practice the Noble Eightfold Path. For the Mahayana, it's a little more complicated. The Mahayana, part of what makes their religion of Buddhism more universally appealing to people is that they don't have to put their lives on hold and spend the entire time or the entire focus of their existence upon these eightfold principles. Instead, they stress that the essence of what Buddha taught, which is compassion and non-attachment and limiting one's desire, is enough to get one pretty far in this world. And the Mahayanists, they write extensively on these features of the religion, so as to suggest that there are ways that everyday people can promote the virtue and goodness of Buddhist thought and effort. Again, this sort of helps create a sense of universal principles, whereas on the left, the challenge was that one had to sort of give up their entire life and just focus every moment in meditation and controlling one's mind, thought, wisdom, so on and so forth. For the Mahayana, this becomes a little more practical and a little more doable for larger numbers of people, because they can focus on the essence rather than the complete practice of the faith. How is the Buddhist community defined? Well, let me click through these because I want you to, I'm being a little wordy here and it might cost us the ability to finish this. But in Theraveda, it's largely an exclusive group of monks and nuns, people who are committing themselves to a very alternative lifestyle. In the Mahayana, it's open. Buddhism is open to a larger group of people that are capable of attaining enlightenment. And this has to do a little bit also with the ideals. In Theraveda, what one aims to become is a person who can meditate and practice the Eightfold Path to such a degree that they will then escape the endless cycling of life. By attaining nirvana, one essentially escapes the hardships of this world and joins a great soul of existence in a life, or not so much in a life, but in a status beyond this world. So you escape suffering, you yearn to escape suffering in Theraveda Buddhist thought. For the Mahayana, one's goal is to become essentially a great practitioner of Buddhism. But once you do that, you would have the option to escape. But the Bodhisattva is the enlightened Buddhist who lingers on so that he can help lift others and bring others into this wonderful place of nirvana. So there's a little bit more of a community emphasis, and in some ways sort of some of the sacrifice of Christianity, the sacrificing of Jesus, the Son of God, for the benefit of others. The Bodhisattva sort of sacrifices the ability to move on in exchange for his love and compassion toward the others around him that he would hope to bring with him into a nirvana where all can enjoy that. So you see the appeal and community of this. Okay, I'm going to click through the remaining two just to make sure that the text gets up there so that you will have this. The path for the Theraveda is the Noble Eightfold Path. In the Mahayana, it's a little bit different. There are virtues that one can practice. This sort of lowers the bar a little bit. It lowers the bar of entry into the faith such that more people, so it's the greater vehicle, Mahayana, the greater vehicle, so that it can be enjoyed by more people. So if you practice generosity, morality, patience, vigor, meditation, and then it says wisdom there, you will be brought in. Finally, faith. faith, and reality.